I'm Professor Indra Abeysekera. Let's look at how to develop a hypothesis. Research is about solving problems or finding answers to questions. So that's the primary aim of research. But when we try to find a solution or answer to a problem or question, we follow a scientific approach. In that approach, we test a theory or theories using a hypothesis. What we do is, by doing that, testing a theory and using hypothesis, we either accept, modify, or reject our general understanding about the phenomenon. Change is the only constant. So the phenomenon can change, and we undertake research because the problems change, the questions change, and therefore the solutions and answers change. So in research, our starting point is the change because the phenomenon has changed, and then we are motivated. The second thing is the motivation. We are motivated to look at a problem, and that leads to a question or a problem where we will seek a solution, and from that we try to make a contribution for that change or the status quo. Let's take an example. Let's say the change is that I'm taking a hypothetical example here. Everything here that I have taken is for illustration only. So change is that we have noticed a change that internet is the evolving marketplace, and our motivation is I'm wondering whether the businesses pay correct amount of tax on internet sales. So based on that motivation, I develop a research question to small businesses, especially I'm now confining to small businesses. Do small businesses pay correct amount of tax? So I undertake an investigation and I come up with a hypothesis, null hypothesis, saying that firm size has no influence on tax paid on internet sales. And then I test my hypothesis, and then the general understanding so far without internet sales before the invent of internet sale was that the firm size, let's say the firm size had no influence on tax paid. But what we found in this research, for example, maybe that we came up with that firm size negatively associate with tax paid on internet sales. So we have come up with a modified understanding, and that modified understanding will lead to a contribution of a solution is that small businesses don't pay correct tax on internet sales. If that is the solution, it will lead to a contribution where we can suggest that the tax office needs to increase their audits on data matching of small businesses conducting internet sales so that they can capture small businesses underpaying taxes. So that contribution will help to meet the needs of the change phenomenon. So when that policy is being introduced and implemented, maybe that situation, that phenomenon can change again into another phenomenon. And then it will lead to another motivation for us, another problem for us to look at, another solution we want to come up with, a contribution, a different contribution to contribute to the new change. So let's look at another example. Here, the problem statement, we start with the problem statement that this study is investigating the stakeholders' powers as determinants uh, and the corporate characteristics uh, to see whether the Chinese socially responsible firms um, are making social and environmental disclosure. So you can see that the theory is the basis for developing hypothesis. So what we have done here is that based on the stakeholder theory, we have identified some variables that represents the stakeholder theory. And similarly, for the legitimacy theory, which talks about the corporate characteristics here, we have identified some variables. So based on these variables, we now develop a hypothesis. So using the stakeholder theory, we developed four hypotheses, and these hypotheses are based on the variables that we want to look at, and there are four variables we have identified. One is the government, the other is the stockholders or the shareholders, third is the creditors, and fourth is the auditors. Whether each of these have an influence on social and environmental disclosure. We then looked at the legitimacy theory and identified four variables, and the four variables are about corporate characteristics, about the entity's size, profitability, industry membership, and listing status. Based on those four variables, we develop a hypothesis in relation to social and environmental disclosure. So when we develop hypotheses which are built upon variables, we either try to relate these hypotheses. In this hypothesis, we try to establish a relationship or a comparison. So there is an independent variable and a dependent variable. So in the example that we took, we identified using the theory independent variables, and then there's a dependent variable, and whether each of these independent variable influences the dependent variable. So we are trying to look at a relationship or correlation. There could be studies that will compare two or more groups, so that becomes a comparison. So in either way, whether it is a comparison or a correlation, there are two possibilities. One is there's no effect on the dependent variable from the independent variable, or there is an effect. There's no effect is the status quo, or it's called the null hypothesis. And the other is the change, because we are expecting a change, and that change is the alternative hypothesis. It is same for comparison, it is same for correlation. And sometimes we can guess the change, the direction of the change. Sometimes we can't guess the direction of the change. So if we can guess the direction of the change, then we can use one-tailed test. If we can't guess the direction of the change, we use a two-tailed test. So the hypotheses are developed in businesses mainly with the intent of strengthening a theory rather than falsifying a theory. Because in social sciences, there are so many variables, so many factors that we want to know about, we haven't found out, because social sciences is an imperfect science. And we search for additional variables to find out whether those variables influence a given phenomenon. So, because we want to make the situation from worse or good to better. In medical research, most problems, research problems, are tested for a better solution. For example, a drug. Is it a better drug? So rather than undertaking the investigation to falsify a theory, its primary aim is to find a better